Now a man who says that Edward Snowden has done, and I quote, a great service to the American people by exposing the truth about what our government's doing in secret. Ron Paul is a former congressman and former presidential candidate. He's now chairman of the Campaign for Liberty. Ron Paul, thank you for joining me. You are a supporter of Edward Snowden and his actions. Why?
Well, from what I hear and what he's done, I mean, he's done a great service because he's telling the truth, and this is what we are starved for. The American people are starved for the truth. And when you have a dictatorship or an authoritarian government, truth becomes treasonous. And this is what they do. If you are a whistleblower, or if you're trying to tell the American people that our country is destroying our rule of law and destroying our Constitution, they turn it on and they say, oh, you're committing treason. So this is a big problem. And to expect any changes without an announcement like this, things keep getting worse. They've gotten worse steadily for the past 10 years. So essentially there is no Fourth Amendment anymore. And for somebody to tell the American people the truth is a heroic effort. And he knows that it's very risky. He knows he's committing, civil disobedience, and he knows that he could get punished. But he believes very sincerely, I'm sure, I've never met the man, but he believes very seriously that what our government is doing to us is so serious that somebody has to speak out. And I think the large majority of American people are sick and tired of hearing how many people are having surveillance on them, whether it's their phones, their internet, and email, and everything else. Matter of fact, I think the president ought to send them a thank you letter, because the president ran on transparency, and we're getting a lot of transparency now. So finally, we're getting the president to fulfill his promise about transparency. So that's pretty exciting for me, because I believe in transparency. But we have our government turned on its head. The government is supposed to be open, and we're supposed to have our privacy. But we don't have any privacy, and the government's totally secret. And then they combine this with what they do with the IRS. Maybe that's how they line up their targets in the IRS. They check on our phone calls and find out what kind of business deals we're doing, so we can audit them and do all these kind of things. It's just totally out of control.
It may be, but the reality is that a new Pew Research Center tracking of millions of Americans coming up between June the 6th and the 9th said the following: is it acceptable for the NSA to track calls of millions of Americans to investigate terrorism? Acceptable, 56%, not acceptable, 41%. So the significant majority of Americans appear to be in favor of this. Going back to you, Ambassador Woolsey, if I may, I just want to read out the Fourth Amendment of the US Constitution to remind people: the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, I just don't see how you can say that what is going on here in complete secrecy from 99% of the people it's being done to lives up to the Fourth Amendment of the US Constitution. It is palpably a breach, isn't it?
Well, it depends on whether or not you want to preserve the country's ability to operate in a world of terrorism in which a lot of terrorists are very technically sophisticated. If you want to defend the country, you're going to have to defend it.
Right, but I understand that, and there's been a lot of sympathy for that from many Americans, but that wasn't the question. The question is whether...
It is the question.
Well, it's not.
It is the question.
No,
that balance between security and liberty is the question.
I understand that is your answer. But the question I was putting to you was whether what is going on, given the absolute secrecy with which it has been going on until Edward Snowden revealed this, whether it is actually allowable under the Fourth Amendment of the US Constitution. Where is the probable cause for 99.9% of the information being effectively seized here?
Given the fact that this system was put together by the people's elected representatives, that it's been upheld by the courts, that it's monitored by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, that it's monitored by Attorney General and officials in the executive branch every 90 days. It was one of these 90-day reports that was leaked, and that it is systematically supported by people like the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Feinstein, I think you would have to say that the government on this subject has done a reasonable job of balancing these two very important interests. If you try to look at liberty without considering security at all, you're putting on blinders. You can't answer the question, just as you couldn't answer it if you just talked about security and not about liberty. They both have to be considered, and you appears not to want to consider security.
No, I absolutely do want to consider it. I was putting a question to you because I was intrigued by what your answer would be, because I've been fighting, as you're probably aware, a lengthy gun control campaign where the absolute letter of the Second Amendment is deemed sacrosanct to so many Americans, and yet it seems to me that many of the same Americans that feel so strongly about the wording of that amendment are quite happy for their rights under the Fourth Amendment to be ridden over, and that's what I find an interesting contradiction. But let me just go to Ron Paul. Let me just go to Ron Paul. I'm going to go to Ron Paul to put a different question to him. Ron Paul, if you had been president, which you could have been, you ran for office this time and you could have won. If you had been president, are you in all seriousness telling me that you would have stopped all of this tracking of data in the way that the NSA has been doing it?
An awful lot of it, but it wouldn't be stopped. You would still have your you would still have your transparency. I mean, you'd still have your intelligence gathering, but it would be done under the law. You would have probable cause, and you would have courts. This idea that you can go to the FISA court and get a warrant, that's ridiculous. That's like the monitoring of the president, say, oh, well, we're going to pick and choose who we're going to assassinate, American citizen or not. But we have monitors. We're going to study this. That's the rule of law. What he's doing is repealing the Magna Carta. You can't just do these kind of things. And this one is not only repealing the principles of liberty, but it's destroying the Constitution. So my question should be to all of you who defend this nonsense is, what should the penalty be for the people who destroy the Constitution? They're always worried about how they're going to destroy the American citizens who tell the truth to let us know what's going on. But we ask the question, what is the penalty for the people who deliberately destroy the Constitution and rationalize and say, oh, we have to do it for security? Well, you know what Franklin said about that. You end up you lose your security and you lose your freedoms too. So I think we've embarked on a very, very dangerous course. The American people are with us on this. It's totally out of control. And I would say if you're confused about what we should do, just read the Constitution. What's wrong with that?
Well,
you know, that gives a pretty good guidelines. If you don't like it, get people to repeal it and change the Constitution, but not just to deny it. I mean, we go to war without a declaration. We totally ignore the Constitution. That is what our problem is today. We have no rule of law, and people say, well, just let secret courts do this, and the government's to know everything, and the American people are to have no privacy. I mean, that reflects an intimidation. People are insecure and think that we need more authoritarianism. You're justifying dictatorship is what you're doing.
I have to leave you there in full flow. It's a fascinating debate. I want to thank you, Ron Paul, and Ambassador Woolsey, both for joining me. It's a very contentious issue. The American public, as the polls suggest, are split. Before we go to the break, quick show of hands. Who here thinks that what Edward Snowden, the leaker, did was right? A few hands. And who thinks absolutely what he did was wrong? So just by my quick look round, I'd say slightly in favour of those who think what he did was wrong, which would be in keeping with the poll results I read earlier. But it's a great...
Justice is not about agenda. It's not about mobilizing people. It's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.